Good afternoon, student friends. Again, we are meeting after a long time, say 1 month. So today we are going to discuss about grievance handling. So whatever we are going to discuss today, after listening, one able to understand the concept of grievance, and in addition to that, one will be able to give an overview of the grievance functions normally in the industrial relations. And apart from that, one will be able to know what is the grievance mechanism and how it is useful to the aggrieved employee, and what are the various approaches one will come across to grievance resolutions. And apart from that, the advantages of grievance handling procedure, the disadvantages. So to begin with the grievance handling, let us try to understand what is a grievance all about. This is a normal, if we go as per customary, broadly, the grievance is defined, in fact, as some kind of dissatisfaction. Grievance is defined as some kind of discontent that the employee working for the organization has with any aspect of the organization. And the grievance may be real, the grievance may be imaginary, sometimes grievance will be legitimate, sometimes you will find that the grievance is ridiculous. So there could be different forms one will come across. So whether it is discontent or dissatisfaction, uh, but it's not a grievance because initially they find an impression which they carry in the form of a complaint. And when the complaint remains unattended and the employee concerned feels that a sense of lack of justice or some kind of fair play has not been extended to him, so dissatisfaction grows. And when dissatisfaction grows and assume the status of a grievance, and usually that is why we always say that grievances relate to a problem of uh, interpretation or perceived, I would say, non-fulfillment of one's expectations from the organizations. And when you have a grievance, all can be unvoiced or stated, in which it can be either written grievance or it can be also an oral grievance. So broadly, it is of three types. One is legitimate grievance, another is imagined grievance, and another is your political grievance. And when we are talking of legitimate grievance, this is a real grievance. In fact, when there is a cause to believe that there has been some sort of vaginal contract violation. But however, it has been observed many times that the clauses kept in the contract different carries different meaning for different people. So when we talk about imagined grievance, as the name itself suggests, that the employee believes that there has been some kind of violation of some clause, or the management has not applied the clauses in the right manner as it should have been. So the real cause of grievance can be something very trivial, but is always given great importance by the employee. Mostly, I would say it is due to some misunderstanding that such grievances occur. And when we look at the political grievance, these grievances are very difficult to solve, I would say. Mostly, you'll notice that these grievances are connected with your unions operating in the organizations. At times, union may keep harping about the grievance without having any kind of merit to get a good standing with its members. So grievance, when we are talking of, there could be certain reasons for grievances. And when we are talking of the reasons in a service industry, normally a manager cannot afford to assign, in fact, frontline job to the employee who holds a grievance against the organization, because you are always irritated. So how do you address to the customers their legitimate things which are to be provided to them? So you can well imagine that the result is the tour escort or a hotel, I would say, receptionist is an unsatisfied employee. For a successful manager, it is always not only be to be aware of about the employees' grievances, but also to understand why such grievance has occurred. So that is why grievances may occur for a variety of reasons. It could be economic. If it is economic, maybe in terms of wage, maybe in terms of wage computation, there has been mistake in computing the wages, or it could be in terms of overtime, or in terms of bonus to be provided, or in terms of commission. So employees feel that they have been neglected. So in that connection, we have to see that how quickly the things can be sorted out. But sometimes also the employees, they feel that they are getting less what they ought to get. Or it could be work environment, pertaining to work environment. The grievance could be relating to work environment, so it is in terms of poor working conditions. Or it could be in terms of your defective equipment being used, or the machinery being supplied, or the tools and the materials. Or there could also be grievances relating to supervision, the disposition of the boss, the immediate supervisor towards the employee, or the perceived notion of favoritism, nepotism, or the bias or work group. So because the grievance also may arise, in fact, because of your intrapersonal problems of individual employees and the union practices, because these are all aimed at reinforcing, these are all aimed at consolidating their bargaining strength. So the absence of a proper, I would say, two-way flow of communication can indeed be a fertile ground for the purpose of breeding grievances. So grievance can have several effects which are essentially very much adverse and counterproductive also to the organizational purpose. The adverse effect include there could be loss of interest, one will notice in work, and consequently that will lead to lack of moral, consequently that will lead to lack of commitment. There could also be poor quality of work, uh, and apart from that also there is increase in wastage, there is increase in the cost factor, and absenteeism will also be increased. So, what is essential at this point of time? How to discover a grievance? So, one has to look at the discovery of grievance. So, knowledge about grievance is important in handling them. Upward channels of communication that we are very much used to, they provide the dependable sources for delivery of grievance. And one can also come to know about grievances, about your gossip, or it could also be the grapevine, or through unions, because unions, they play a pivotal role in this aspect. So it is always preferable to have first-hand knowledge, and based on the first-hand knowledge, which must be based on your observation and through, I would say, direct communication from the employee concerned. Some of the uh, important ways of discovering grievances, your direct observation, because a good manager must know one thing, that how his subordinates behave, how his subordinates conduct, how his subordinates operate in ordinary circumstances. So when significant changes which are noticed in their behavior or significant changes in their behavior occur, it is sure to affect the performance. So absenteeism will be there, lateness will be there, they will be indifferent to the organizational work. So these are some of the forms in which you have discontentment, you have dissatisfaction. So all these things will find some kind of expression. So a careful analysis, if we go for uh, analysis of your grievance rates, analysis of your accident rates in the plant, or request made by the employees for transfer or indiscipline. That will also reveal what is the general pattern which are not easily noticeable, which are not easily discernible in the first instance. And then you may go for a grievance procedure, and the most important channel that normally we look at through which the discontent and the dissatisfaction can be communicated, that is through your grievance procedure. So a grievance procedure that provides an avenue, an opportunity to an employee to give some kind of vent to his grievance or her grievance. So there is a dilemma. Normally, the dilemma most managers face is whether you are encouraging or discouraging grievance, and we have management, and the management does not induce employee to express their grievance. Obviously union will do so, and discouraging employees uh, over a period of time from expressing their grievances means they will think that you are ignoring their grievances, and when they simmer and burst, the management find it beyond their capacity to deal with them adequately. So at that point of time, it is important to have a grievance procedure to process the grievance from the very beginning. So this aspect has to be taken into consideration very seriously. And also you have gripe boxes, and the gripe boxes is a facility to file your anonymous complaints. And when you are talking of anonymous complaints about the various causes of discontent, various causes of dissatisfaction in the organization, so it is very much different from the suggestion scheme, and maybe in vogue in a company. So in this case, anonymity is assured. So nobody should know who is the person who has put that paper in that box, and there is no reward. There is also no neither reward nor punishment. So the limited purpose is to that let the management know. In fact, the what the employees uh, feel without fear or fear of victimization. So most of the time, what we have noticed that we go for open door policy, and most of the organization um, uh, preach open door policy, but do not practice it. So the policy is good, and the policy is democratic, and usually from the organizational point of view, it is ineffective, and at times it is counterproductive. So organization will do well when we look at that the organization has a grievance procedure, and the grievance procedure not only exists but also it is supplemented by open door policy, becomes redundant. And there is also another is your exit interview, because employee usually quit organization due to dissatisfaction, or they have better prospects elsewhere. It requires certain skills, and to get to know what is the actual reason, what is the real reason for leaving the job. So exit interview, if conducted effectively, can provide vital information to improve personnel policies. It will provide vital information even to identify the weaknesses of the organization, even to identify the strength of the organization. Because what is being observed, that some organization they mail an exit interview 3 months after an employee leaves, so that he did not fear about the poor reference and give the truth without any fear, without any favor. We have also other channels like you have group meetings or periodical interviews with employees and collective bargaining sessions. There are some of the channels through which one can have information about your employee discontent, about employee dissatisfaction before them. Because each channel that we are talking of refer to above what I discussed a little while ago serves the purpose in a different way. Using more than one channel is desirable because it may not be possible to get all the information of, about all types. In fact, all types of dissatisfaction normally we come across from one channel. For example, the type of information one can get through grievance procedure would be perceptibly different from what one will get from a gripe box or from an exit interview. So employee grievances are usually the human problems. They are real or they may be also imaginary, but whatever may be the cause, the approach should be humane and sensitivity and empathy. Both they are required in the grievance handling diligently, and they need to be handled with care. There is no definite formula, or there is no single way in this regard one can try out tested measures. So in all these cases, when a complaint is a when is a complaint is coming, is it a grievance? So when is a complaint? Let us look at when is a complaint not a grievance. Suppose the management we are talking of, management has not violated anyone's rights. There is no grievance, as I told you. So, but there may be a real complaint. But if you are a good steward, you will deal with the complaints as seriously as would be in case of a grievance. So there are different types of complaints. We have personal troubles, and we make a request for. Sometimes also we make a request for advice. So, what is happening over here that you will often find that people want to confide in you and treat them sympathetically and always try to help them and keep confidences strictly to yourself. Similarly, you have also complained about fellow workers because these need a lot of, I would say, tact. These need a lot of, I would say, diplomacy. These need a lot of, I would say, moral authority on your part. So this sort of complaint becomes a grievance if management gets involved when it should not be, and according to the contract or according to the past services, or it doesn't get involved when it should be. So at the time when it is not needed, you get involved. At the time when it is needed, you don't get yourself involved. So there are also complaints about the government agencies and the local bodies, and if that is not taken care of on a long term, so that will lead to the grievance. Similarly, you have also complaints against the management, and in this case, when you have complaint against the management, we look at one aspect that when you have complained against the management not covered by the contract. So there may be cases you have to face during your organizational life which do not involve, I would say, an injustice, do not violate, in fact, past practices, and they are not also covered by any contract. So still, it may be possible tormently these complaints by informal discussions between the union and the employer. Similarly, you have also borderline cases. You should seek advice from the chief steward or the you must seek advice from the grievance committee or your local business representatives who might have been there to operate on behalf of the company before taking them as a grievance. So report back uh, to the person complaining as soon as possible, explaining what you are doing and why you are doing, so that you come to know the information for which he is showing his discontentment. Similarly, there are complaints against the unions, and it is up to you, in fact, to explain that um, to the complainer the what is his right, which are under the rules and constitution of the local union or the international union to which it is all affiliated. So when we are talking of the grievance, obviously there is a classification of grievance, and when we look at the classification of grievance, grievances may fall into certain broad categories, like you have wages, grievance relating to wages, incentives, grievance relating to work assignments, grievance relating to complaints about the job specifications. Another type is there, your grievance where due to interpretation of the rules which has been made wrongly, or there could be grievance due to transfer, there could be grievance due to the seniority which has been overlooked, or the promotion due but never is made. Another category is that when we are talking of the grievance, obviously what we look at what is the working condition in the plant, what is the safety measures that the management is taking, and what kind of health provisions or the welfare amenities being provided by the organizations. And the fourth type is there that if you look at the supervision point of view, if I look at the discipline point of view, if I look at the favoritism point of view, if I look at the victimization point of view, or if I look at our interpersonal relation also. And the last one is that violation of the terms of collective arguments. And there could be unfair labor practices, there could be unfair trade practices, wrongful extraction of work, wrongful doing the work. So there has been dissatisfaction, and when there has been dissatisfaction, so you have complaint, the problems that will lead to complaint. If the complaint is not redressed, then in that case, that will give rise to your grievance. And according to tigers and mayors, in fact, so there are theorists, the tigers and the mayors. Um, there are three terms they have used in this case. One is your dissatisfaction, another is your complaint, another is your grievance. They indicate that various forms of employee dissatisfactions are there, various stages of employee dissatisfaction is there, because whenever you are using that particular word dissatisfaction, this is something that disturb an employee, whether or not lie expression, whether you try to lie express your unrest in words, but when you use that word complaint, it is spoken dissatisfaction, it is written dissatisfactions, and and it is always brought to the notice of the supervisor, it is always brought to the attention of the supervisor or the shop steward. um, but when you come across grievance, it is simply a complaint which has been ignored. It is simply a complaint which has been overridden. It is simply a complaint which has been dismissed without any due consideration attached to it. So obviously, the grievance in the context of business organization is always expressed either verbally or it is given in the written form. And if the discontent remains unexpressed, obviously doesn't constitute the grievance for the reason being that the management cannot take note of to have some kind of subliminal process which are not ventilated, which are all not ventilated. So that way it doesn't mean that the management should not be concerned at all with unexpressed discontent. So nevertheless, so the fact remains that in the organizational setting, when we are operating, such type of unexpressed grievances are not capable of being uh, hand, hand, handled, and that is through the grievance procedure, because the grievance is more formal in character than a complaint. So while complaint can be either oral or written, but the grievance is always in written form, is that you have to give in writing. So unaddressed or your piled of individual grievances may often assume the form of industrial dispute and thereby attracting the provisions of Industrial Dispute Act 1947 or uh, lead to a snap industrial actions such as you can say the work stoppage or the violation or your um, or disorderly behavior. So, having discussed all these things, so it is appropriate to mention one thing, that what are the causes of grievance? An employee is dissatisfied, and when the employee is dissatisfied, obviously he harbors a grievance. When he uh, is not happy and there has been infringement of his rights, or there has been um, infringement in his interest, or his interest has been jeopardized. So this sense of grievance generally uh, um, arises out of your misinterpretation or misapplication of your company policies, your company practices. So obviously, these grievances, when we are talking of, mostly arise because of, first of all, from economic point of view, concerning wages. So the demand for individual adjustment, and the worker, they feel that he is not paid properly, he is not paid fully. So obviously the complaint about incentives will come, or the piece rate, whatever you are paying me, they are too low or too complicated. So as calculation is concerned, mistakes in calculation regarding the wages of the worker, etc. Similarly, as I told you, the grievance could be, the cause could be concerning wages. Similarly, one will also notice that it is concerning supervision, because many a times we receive complaints against inadequate instructions given for the job performance. So objections of having a particular foreman, a foreman playing favorite, the foreman ignores any sort of complaint which is coming from the subordinate side. Foreman making so much of objections to the manner in which general methods of supervision used to be. There are too many rules. The regulations are not clearly posted, so that gives rise to your ambiguity. And there is another way, that is your general working conditions and unhygienic working conditions, rather, I would say, because unhygienic working condition, when we are talking of, it is relating to poor or working condition, or it could be your poor production or standards not being met, or there is non-availability of tools, so there is non-availability of materials, there is non-availability of equipments altogether. And there is also another cause, could be your collective bargaining, because in most of the cases, what we have noticed that the company is attempting to undermine the trade union, undermine the workers who belong to that particular union. So the contract with the labor force has been violated, and the company doesn't deal effectively with the union grievances, as a result of which company doesn't even allow the supervisors to deal with and settle the grievances of the employees, etc. Because the company disregards the agreements made already made with the co-workers or the trade union. Similarly, the cause could be your management policy relating to wage rates or the methods of wage payments, or management policy relating to overtime, incentive payments, management that means uh, thinking management policy relating to promotion, management policy relating to transfer, management policy relating to even seniority issues. There management policy due to lack of opportunity for career growth. This could be the reason that your leave not being sanctioned. So issues relating to employee conduct, issues relating to employee modus operandi, or the behavior, unhappiness or unhappy relations with the bosses, or you may say unhappy relation with the unions, or violation of the company laws, or the violation of rules, regulations which have been established, certain conditions, accepted practices are also there, and there has been violation of the labor laws. Because if we look at that employees aggrieve, on the left hand side, you have frontline supervisor, followed by middle management, followed by the top level. But in the right hand side, what will happen that you have union representatives, you have middle management representative, you have trade union uh, leaders, and if there is some kind of confusion among them, then that will be sorted out through arbitration. And in all these cases, one thing which is very, very important, that your grievance discipline and conflict resolution. Because in an unorganized education, or the unorganized organization normally you come across, or the business establishment you come across, the operation of the grievance procedure contains certain steps like the aggrieved party, the party who got affected, known as aggrieved party, verbally explain his or her grievances to his immediate supervisor. Or sometimes also we come across conferences for a, sometimes we come across discussions, specifically it is all arranged for the purpose, and the employee seeks that type of satisfaction from each supervisors, because the grievance that we are talking of can be settled if the supervisor itself has employed and has itself trained the people, and if he adheres to strictly to international business school, that is also to be seen. Because the second step, when the grievance is not settled by the supervisor, because in this case it is sent to the high level manager, who is in the as per the hierarchy of the organization, with a note content therein that which are very much acceptable, and which are mentioned the time, which are mentioned the place, and which are mentioned the nature of the action to which in fact the employee objects are very much located. So the higher the level of manager, the higher is the uh, general superintendent or industrial relations officers. Similarly, another cause could be that the grievance is to be submitted to the government committee, and when it is submitted to the government committee, we have to ensure one thing that in most of the cases, what we have observed that the grievance is to be submitted to the grievance committee, the decision of the supervisor and the high level manager have not um, solved the problem. So in that case, the committee so formed, which is composed of some fellow, you can say employees, fellow management representatives, or which is going to consider uh, the consider their autonomy and may suggest some kind of possible solution attached to it. And if the decision or the suggestion for the grievance committee is not accepted by the um, grievant, the person who has made this grievance, as may approach the uh, management of the or the uh, corporate executives, either the case. So, and the final step is always taken when the grievance that we are all more concerned about is referred to an arbitration. And when it is a question of your when we are talking of all these things, obviously the final step is taken and the grievance is referred to arbitrator, and the job of the arbitrator is acceptable to the employees as well as the management. And but in practice, we are talking of all these things, but in practice, the grievance procedure differs from the company to company. For example, if I give the example of Botany computers, the employees can file their complaints on the internet through eCare, the grievance resolution system. But the complaints center around three areas: human resource, one area; another area is facilities, and another is your project related. So the response should be made here with that the days failing with to which is also is auto um, escalated to the next level from the process underwriting, and in fact the process underwriting to the function head to the management council. So there is statutory provision concerning the grievance redressal procedure in India. But there are three important, I would say, legal provisions that they normally do specify the rule relating to the grievance redressal procedure in India, industrialization. And there is also Industrial Employment Standing Order Act, that is 1946 clause 15, where it is written that mortal mandatory for every establishment employing roughly 100 or more workers to have some kind of appropriate offices and to deal with your complaint of the employees. So on the basis of that, we have Industrial Dispute Act 1947, and in the Industrial Dispute Act 1947, there shall be grievance settlement authority in every industrial organization, and that employs either 50 or more workers. But whenever the industrial dispute arises in these organizations, obviously the concerned workers to each union may refer such a dispute to the grievance settlement authority for the purpose of settlement. And the grievance settlement authority, what they do in the due time frame, they shall proceed within the manner and they conclude the proceedings. And there shall be no reference for any kind of dispute to the board. There is no reference of any dispute to court. There is no there shall be no reference, I would say, of any dispute to tribunals, unless and until such a dispute which the manager considers by the Grievance Settlement Authority to reach a decision, and the decision to reach the all the stakeholders and became unacceptable to any of the parties of the dispute. Similarly, also we have Factories Act. We have Factories Act 1948, because if you look at the section 49 of the Factories Act, it makes it necessary the appointment of welfare officer in every factory which has employed roughly 500 or more workers, but these officers are actually, in fact, responsible, I would say, for settling the grievances of the employees. So, what I mean to say that there is a model grievance procedure, and in the model grievance procedure, you start from the top, and when you start from the top, there is national commission on labor, and the National Commission on Labor has suggested a model grievance procedure which would ensure a speedy settlement of grievance, and the party who got affected, known as aggrieved party, so the aggrieved employee shall convey his grievance either verbally to the officer designated by the management to deal with the grievance, or the officer will have to reply to the complaint within 48 hours of its representation to him. And if the grievance is not satisfied, obviously, with the answer, obviously does not um, receive any kind of things within 48 hours, then he shall present the grievance to the departmental head, and the departmental head who has been nominated for the purpose. So the head must give his reply within 3 days of the presentation of the grievance. And if the aggrieved party is still not satisfied with the decisions being made, so far as departmental head is concerned, or the aggrieved party does not receive any kind of reply with respect to your stipulated period, and it can approach the grievance committee for the purpose of settlement of the grievance, or the, you can say uh, any kind of dissatisfactions. So the grievance committee has to give the gives the recommendation in 7 days, and the report is to be provided to the management. The management must communicate to communicate the decision of the um, um, made by the appropriate authority, and if the employee is still not satisfied with the decision made by the grievance committee, or doesn't receive the decisions from it, he can make an appeal to the management for the purpose of revision of the decision taken. And in that case, management also can take a week for appeal to be considered, and the revised decision is to be informed to the grievance committee. And if the employee is still not satisfied with decision of the management, then in that case, grievance may be referred to voluntary arbitrations within 3 weeks from the date of, you can say, the week after the uh, decision taken by the management. And finally, the decision that we are more concerned about, um, the decision of the arbitrator, that is final and that is also binding on both the parties, the management and the union, everybody. So we have, over a period of time, we have revised our industrial relation. There has been a code which has been framed, Industrial Relation Code 2020, and which has been adopted by the Parliament and assented by the Honorable President of India. And in fact, they are not implemented till March 22nd. Proposes certain procedures like your industrial establishment employing 20 or more people shall have one or more grievance redressal committee for resolution of disputes which might be arising out of their individual grievances. Similarly, your grievance redressal committee shall consist of equal number of members spreading the employer the workers to the chosen or in some such cases in the prescribed. And finally, you have the uh, grievance redressal committees which shall consist of equal number of members representing the employer and the workers, and they need to be chosen in such a manner they may be prescribed, and the chairman of the grievance redressal committee shall be selected among some of the um, persons representing the employer and the workers alternatively on rational and uh, basics of every year. And the total number of employees of the grievance redressal committee shall not exceed 10, because they always try to find to make the mechanism productive and always try to see that what things are happening, and the application to be made in respect of the dispute which is referred to in subclause 1 may be filed before the grievance redressal committee by any aggrieved workers in such a manner as may be prescribed within 1 year from the date on which the cause of action of such dispute arises. Similarly, you have grievance redressal committee which may also complete its proceeding, no doubt about it, within 30 days of the receipt of applications. So what I mean to say that the grievance is there, handling has to be made, and finally you have grievance resolution approaches. There may be many approaches to grievance handling as dictated by the uh, policy makers, by the practices, those who are doing, or by you can talk about the aspect of uh, the culture of the organization, the practice of the organization, because the approaches to grievance resolution uh, uh, can be discussed by policy of the organization, can be discussed with the practices being followed within the organization, or you may say the culture of the organization. So some of these are very much concerned with your sub questions. So if I put whether your organization should have grievance mechanism at all, so it all depends whether it is there is all right. You try to bring about some kind of affirmative. Or what will happen that you may also mm, answer to this question depending upon managerial style, managerial philosophy of each organizations. So what I intend to mention over here that, for instance, organization which believe in autocratic style of managing people may not find it necessary to worthwhile. But the to have a grievance mechanism, but they need to operate on the presumption that the management has exclusively given you the right to manage effectively. So, in all, another thing which might be asked that whether it should be formal, structured, or informal, because in the case of the former, grievance procedure is formulated by management. And when grievance procedure is formulated by management in great detail, indicating what are the steps involved, what is the time frame you're communicating various decisions, or the person, so the official who will be dealing with the grievance in different stages. So everything has to be more has to be brought about some kind of clarity, and so that when you apply, there will be no problem at all in handling it. So there could be multi-level, or the question is the manner in which we are going to disposing these grievances. Single level, if we are talking of redressal, that means the grievance is disposed of at the stage at which it is first submitted. without any further review by your superior officer. In other words, you may say that the decision given by the authority to whom it is first submitted becomes the final and conclusive. But if you are talking that whether it is unilateral or participative, so unilateral approach to grievance, if at all you go for the purpose of redressal, it necessarily implies that the redressal process that for which we are more concerned about is very much management driven. Obviously, if it is management driven, then its decisions are not open to scrutiny by the representatives of employees. So on the other hand, participative bilateral mechanisms ensures that union representatives they participate very much meticulously in the redressal process, even if it is jointly made with the management. So participative mechanisms will provide path for openness in handling grievances and have an immense educative value content therein so far as term policy or the uh, positions or to understand long-term policy and its implications for the organization, for the individuals better. Whether it is time bound or open ended, if you are talking of time bound or open ended, obviously individual grievances, as already we have discussed in the little while ago, they have far-reaching consequences from the standpoint of your employee motivation or from the point of view of your employee's performance. So it is therefore, I'm of the opinion that essential that the grievance redressal should be as quickly as possible, and it must be viewed in the light of open ended grievance procedures. It is likely to delay the process of the grievance redressal, with the result the dissatisfaction remains, and the dissatisfaction remains alive during the entire period affecting the employee performance. So that is why this is certainly not in the best interest of the organization, I would say. So a formal grievance mechanism should be prescribed and which must be disposed of within a reasonable time period. And for the purpose of at each stage by which a decision has to be given to the grievant, and failing which, in fact, the matter should automatically be referred to the next stage, or whether it is bipartite or tripartite, as per Section 9 of the Industrial Dispute Act 1947, because it provides that unresolved grievances for reconciliation, arbitration, or adjudication. So for the measures, they have their own advantages, they have their own disadvantages. Bipartite redressal mechanism, if at all you are going for, it operates as much faster pace as than tripartite one. So this is because the process of adjudication, the process of arbitration is necessarily slow and it is cumbersome, time consuming. The issue may take years before it is finally decided one way or the other. But however, the employees in general, they prefer the third party intervention on the score that the third party must be an outsider, is more objective, is more dispassionate than the insider. So we always look for the formal mechanisms because it has its own advantages. So having discussed all these things, we must look at the principles governing the good grievance procedure. If at all we look for a ideal grievance procedure, that must rest on certain principles. Principles like grievance procedure that must be prompt, grievance procedure which is well defined, it must be simple, easy to understand, and it must be time bound. And the grievance procedure should always encourage the employees, I would say, that how best they can ventilate their grievance without any innovation, without any hindrances. Um, and it should facilitate the settlement, even if at the lowest level of the ladder as far as practicable. And it should be in conformity with the existing legislation. and the whatever may be the procedure, grievance procedure, but it must permit the involvement of the union. And when I say involvement of the union, that is at the stage of formulating the grievance procedure, not at a later stage. But also at the latter stage when we are talking of, that is in its implementation of the same things, and it should gain the confidence of the employees at large, and must try to promote healthy industrial relation climate in the organization. So that is why there should be a procedure to handle grievances. To start with, you receive the problems precisely and you try to define problem precisely, and identify the nature of dissatisfactions in its integrated whole, not in a fragmented way. And always you must try to get the facts and ensure that the facts which you have received represent the real picture in the more objective way, and analyze those facts, look for precedents, if any, it is set in the panel, and look for the organizational implications of the likely solutions, and always try to take a decision. And when you are taking a decision, make sure that the solution doesn't trigger problems elsewhere within the organization, because you'll be giving solution for this part, then the solution will give rise to another problem in another part. So that you must try to avoid and apply the answer to the case which is at the hand, and communicate the result. Because if you have a good grievance procedure, it has its own advantages, because well planned grievance procedure or well administered grievance procedure has certain advantages, like it offers opportunity to the employees to process their grievance in a more dignified manner. Apart from that, also it satisfies the employees' need of self-expression, and it improves your management skills of management, and that too at the various hierarchical levels by building of mature behavior. In fact, it helps management to locate problem areas, and what are those problem areas, and who are responsible for it, and what are the reasons for it, and at best what can be done to overcome those things, and the same thing should not be repeated. So, if you have a very well planned, administered grievance procedure, that is also likely to strengthen the union functioning and fosters understanding between the parties, they are going to facilitate the process of negotiation. So it gives an indication, in fact, to the general level of employees' morale, and it gives an indication as to the general level of employees' attitudes towards the management and the kind of problem they face in the work situations, because the problems are not the same always. So in all these cases, there is the department known as human resource department. They have a role, and if you look at the role of human resource department, they have to devise a very sound grievance procedure which could serve as an effective upward communication channel, and they are to advise the line managers about the importance of a sound grievance handling system and its implementation, and to train the supervisory personnel in interviewing skills, or to train the supervisory personnel in counseling skill, which is very much required, so that you not only to implement promptly the decisions taken by the grievance committee, but also to maintain some kind of effective close liaisoning with all concerned, and to maintain the records of activities of the grievance committee, which may be required as and when it is needed. So to review the procedure if necessary, because as situation changes, time changes, modification is required to modify the existing procedures, and which will suit the changing circumstances. And finally, to follow up the individual cases of grievance settled and identify what could be their effect on the employee concerned as well as on the employees of the organizations. So one must try to develop a linkage of the grievance redressal procedure. So in that, grievance handling is essentially, we can say, a problem solving exercise. A typical problem solving exercise will involve certain stages, like first of all you have to identify and define the problems and collect the factuals data and make analysis of the data so collected, and generate alternatives and weigh those alternatives, go for a cost benefit analysis, uh, weigh them in terms of their effectiveness, and finally a decision, and decision taken to be communicated and follow it up. Because many a times we go for results interview, and there we try to find out um, what is the role of an active listener, because in all these cases it is very important to see that the interview setting is such that is going to ensure your absolute privacy and that is free from all kind of interruptions. So grievance handling and the management pitfalls, that is also to be taken into consideration for all the practical purposes. So with this, we come to an end of this session. Thank you very much. Have a nice time. Good day.